Hey everybody, today's video is going to be an experiment that we're going to do. I shot a video not too long ago where I discussed surface agitation and whether or not you really needed it, and I don't believe you really need a lot of vigorous surface agitation. You do need movement at the surface, but not necessarily what I think of as vigorous agitation. So in the video I shot, I explained the way I set up my tanks, and I set them up without a lot of surface agitation. What I do is I set my spray bar. If you will notice here, the spray bar has 3 or 4 sections on it, and I angle it so that most of the sections are facing the glass in the back of the tank and then slightly downward, and then the very first section I angle upwards. So what you see is that little bit of rippling effect you get right near the surface skimmer. Now the reason I do that is not for the agitation it provides me. I do that so that it actually gives me a little bit more leeway when I put floating food in there. The little bit of water flow near the surface skimmer actually sort of pushes the food away a little bit, and I get to have a little bit more time with the food floating on the surface. It doesn't just go in and go right down the skimmer. But that's the only real purpose that first section being turned upwards provides for me. It does not really give me much in the way of surface agitation. I have this tank set up pretty much the exact same way. You can see that little bit of rippling on the surface right there. Now this tank, the surface skimmer, is all clogged up at the moment, and that's why you see I've got this oil and biofilm floating on the surface in here. My skimmer's not working at the moment. But you can also see that that first little section of spray bar is all I've got facing upwards. So that is the extent of agitation I get. And of course, with all of these plants and everything, you can see there's pretty much no agitation on this end of the tank. This tank, same way, same exact setup. I've got the spray bar angling down. Oh no, I'm sorry, this tank is a little bit different. It's a smaller spray bar, it's a smaller filter. I actually have none of the spray bar facing directly upwards. I just have it sort of forward and up at a slight angle, so I have even less agitation, but I have more surface flow. So I don't know how you define agitation, but I don't think of that as being a lot of surface agitation. This tank actually has more surface agitation than most of my tanks do, but I don't necessarily even still think of that as agitation. Anyway, I had a viewer this morning challenged me to put my money where my mouth is, and they suggested I take the filter off of one of my tanks for a month and see what happens, which leads me to believe that they didn't pay very close attention to the video I shot. I did speak at length about how you can run a tank without a filter, but it's a lot more labor intensive, and I'm not willing to actually go through all of that just to prove a point to somebody. They did, however, say that they would like to see me take my surface agitation that I just showed you, that little first section of spray bar, and they said to turn that one downwards so that I have no effect on the surface at all. In other words, make sure all the spray bars point down into the tank and I don't get that little tiny bit of ripple up in that corner. And they guaranteed me that within hours my fish would be gasping at the surface for air. So today what we are going to do is I'm going to go turn those spray bars down and face them into the tank. I'm also going to do that on this 125 gallon tank over here, which is actually much less densely stocked but holds a lot more water. So I figure it'll be a good way we can mix it up. We can try the 40 and the 255s and then the 125. And I've got work to do today, so I'm going to get out of here for several hours, and I'll be back later this afternoon. And we're going to see if all my fish are gasping at the surface, as someone guarantees me they will be. I guarantee they won't be, and nothing's going to look any different at all, except the water is going to have a little bit more scum floating on it, and that's going to be about it. It's not going to change anything. But we will find out. So let me go get started. I want to get in here and adjust all these spray bars. We'll do one more little quick segment of video before I leave for the day, and that way I can show you how I've made the adjustments and what the tanks look like. And then I am off for the day, and we're going to go leave it for several hours and come back later and see what my tanks look like. Alright, so what I did was I just rolled the spray bars around, so the part that was facing downwards across the back glass is now facing sort of forwards towards us, and you can see how it's affecting the roots there that are spraying. The difference it made, I know you can't really see through all of the vegetation, is that that first section of spray bar that was angled up and back is now angled down and back, and it is spraying across the back of the glass and downwards like the original rest of the spray bar used to be. So I just rolled the whole spray bar around about a half a turn, and so I now no longer have any kind of surface agitation other than the simple circulation in the tank, the water that's moving around the tank. I do have the filter running, and I do have my power head still running, so I am continuing to circulate water around the tank. I am simply not angling it upwards so that any of the water affects the surface directly. I'm not getting any what you would call agitation on the surface, and I don't think anybody's going to argue with me that that is an agitation-free surface. You can barely even see movement. Those bubbles are floating around. Of course, I've also got stuff on the glass. The glass is making it a little difficult to tell where the surface is versus what's on the glass. But that little bit of movement is all that you can really see on the surface anymore. So that is a pretty still surface. Fortunately, this tank has gouramis in it, so if they're starving for oxygen, they can always go get some off the surface. The other fish in the tank will suffer, however, if the oxygen levels get too low. And lastly, I did this tank. Same thing, I just rolled the spray bar. You can actually still see a little bit of movement on the surface in there because the spray bar didn't roll around far enough apparently. So I'll get in there and I'll make that little adjustment. I'll roll that a little bit further so that there's no surface agitation at all in this tank. But you saw the 125, you saw the gourami tank. They both are just still as could be, no surface movement at all. And again, I will get in there and make that little adjustment on this tank so that we don't even get that little bit of surface adjustment. So I'm off to work. I'll be back in a few hours. I'll check this afternoon and we'll see what these tanks look like. Alright everybody, here we are 10 hours into the experiment, and I see no change whatsoever. None of my fish are acting even remotely like they are getting oxygen deprivation. None of them are swimming near the surface. Even my anabantoids, my gouramis in there, who can breathe atmosphere, well, breathe is not quite the right word, but they can gulp atmospheric air if they really need to, and they're not even doing that. So we can come over here and we can look at my angelfish tank, and we've got the same thing going on. We've got nothing really, showing any signs of being oxygen deprived. That's what the surface has looked like for the last 10 hours since I left for work this morning. This gourami tank has looked like that for the last 10 hours since I went to work this morning. So I don't know if you want to call that a still surface or agitation or what, but I think that's pretty low on the agitation. That's just wobbling for me opening it. And then my 125 over here is the same way. This end never has any movement simply because of where it is with all of this plant. And then down at this end where we would be able to actually see something, we again have that. And you can see none of my fish are acting any slightly bit unusual. My congos are still in there spawning. I've fed the tanks normally today. All behavior is perfectly normal. Once again, I got another gourami over here, another fish that could be breathing air if it wanted to, and it is showing no signs of needing to or wanting to. Another anabantoid that could be breathing air and has not been. So I stand by what I said, and I did just get another comment from the same original commenter about an hour ago. I told them this morning that I was going to do a video and I was going to do an experiment, and I would be releasing the video soon. And yet the comment was still basically along the lines of, see, that's what's wrong with people, you're not willing to do any experiments, to try anything, etc., etc. So clearly somebody's not paying attention to what I'm really saying in my videos. So what I've decided to do is wait until tomorrow, and we're going to see what happens overnight. Because what this viewer has failed to point out is, in a planted tank, the plants actually use up oxygen during the night. So overnight, in a planted tank, even with some surface agitation, you still wind up by the following morning with fairly depleted oxygen levels. So we are going to go overnight in this tank with the spray bar still positioned the way it is, with no surface movement at all. In fact, we're going to do that in all three of these tanks. That's it. We're at 10 hours now. So by tomorrow morning when we wake up, it'll be 24 hours, and it'll also be overnight. So that is going to be a different video, and what I'm going to do is actually discuss all about this stuff. I myself am not, what's the word I'm looking for here? Formally schooled in any of this stuff, but I have studied, I have experimented, I have done my research, I have talked to people who are formally schooled in this kind of stuff, and I can go into a lot more detail about the types of stuff I'm talking about from my point of view and my experience. If anybody disagrees with that or has other experiences, I will certainly welcome the conversation or whatever. I'm certainly open to learning new things. But for now, I think we're just going to call this a video. I've clearly shown that turning that spray bar down does not have my fish gasping at the surface within a few hours. It's been 10 hours and there's no change whatsoever. So I've clearly debunked that. And then tomorrow morning we will see how everybody's doing. And I'm 100% confident that everybody's going to be swimming around exactly like they are just now. Everything's going to be completely fine come tomorrow morning. And then tomorrow I will shoot a much more in-depth video where we actually go into detail and talk about water circulation and gas exchange and filtration, and how, if you did want to run a tank without a filter on it, how you would go about setting it up and how you would have to maintain it, and all about that sort of thing. So look forward to that. Subscribe if you're not already. That way you will get it. I hope you enjoyed this one. Hope that proved a point. I'll see you real soon in the next one.